Hello, welcome back to the Write a Book You Love Summit, where we're talking to a bunch of best-selling authors and writing coaches and experts on how to create your best book. Joined in this interview with Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press best-selling author of The Writer's Block Myth, Heloise Jones. Heloise, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Jesse. It's really good to be here.
Nice to have you. And we were just talking in the green room how it's been just about a year since the Writer's Block Myth came out, a guide to get past stuck and experience lasting creative freedom. So not only, I think, do you have a great perspective to share on the writing process itself, but also on the process of creating your whole book and releasing it. But really the focus here is on, I'd love for you to just sort of share the premise and sort of the story behind the Writer's Block Myth. And we can dive into some of the tips and the strategies and tactics that you have within there.
Well, the Writer's Block Myth is really a book about life, that with the premise that writer's block is real, but it's not a pathology. It's connected to something either in the story, within yourself, or within your life. And often what you need is just a shift in perspective, a tiny shift, or a redefinition to get moving again. Not all writers are the same, so not all the same solutions apply to every writer. So it's a book that doesn't have a premise that this is going to give it to you. We don't have one magic bullet. You find the way that works for you. And so what I offer in the book is not only going through the inner game of the mindset of being a writer, but all the things that trip us up, and then give you examples on how you might look at it differently. All the exercises are short. The last thing we need when we're just like overloaded or stuck is something that's going to say, sit down and spend 30 minutes on this. Because we don't need to spend 30 minutes on an exercise to get somewhere. 5 to 10 minutes, make a shift, start moving. And remember the self-forgiveness that we're human, which means we're going to be falling again or we're going to get stuck. Now, I do want to share, Jesse, do you want to hear like sort of where the book came from?
Yeah, I think I would love to hear that as well. And if just to reflect back some of what I just heard, it seems that the writer's block myth, that the myth is actually that writer's block is some kind of a condition, that there are other contributing factors or something else going on that gives the impression of writer's block. Would you say a little bit more on that?
I will. As humans, we are creative. And our creative life, often what happens is we feel a split between our creative life and our life in the real world. But actually, they're linked. And when we start seeing that and we see that relationship, then we're able to look inside. We're able to look at our relationships. We're able to look at our situation. We're able to understand that pauses sometimes are healthy, that retreats are not selfish, that they're self-care, that taking a long time to write a book, because it does take time to write a book. Some people can write it in a week. There are binge writers, and it's really about what you want out of your book. Do you want just a volume to hold in your hand? Do you want to share it with family and friends? Or do you want the whole world to see it? I really want the whole world to see it because this is an empowerment book. This is a book with something that you can refer back to and use the tools to keep yourself moving, that you're not dependent upon somebody else. So if your goal is to complete a book, which I think most of the people here, that's their goal, that's what I would like to offer, that find the ways that work for you.
And
what?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I really like about your book here in the Writer's Block Myth is that it's not like a prescription saying, now do this or spend 30 minutes doing that. You're right. You'd lose so many people if you try and ask for more time when people already feel overwhelmed. But really, I think you give a lot of tools. You actually call them the 7 keys to set you free to write. And I think in seeing those, people finds the one that unlocks whatever problem they're experiencing. You want to share, maybe pick a key or two that you found is particularly helpful?
Well, I'm going to tell you the one that when I give presentations and workshops, the number one is a tool called the evidence journal. And the evidence journal is a way for us to see what's really in our life versus the stories we have in our head of what's there. Because as humans, we tend to focus on what's not there versus what is there, like the hurt left knee when the right knee is perfectly fine and we can work around that. It's a tangible tool. It's something that you write. And, you write in. And an example. I had somebody that said, I'm on Facebook. I love Facebook. It's my connection, but it's stealing my writing time. So she took her evidence journal and she documented how much time she spent on Facebook and how much time she spent writing. And what she found out is that she spent way less time on Facebook than she thought, and way more time writing than she thought. So it's like the real world evidence that takes us out of the stories in our heads. And I don't know if that's one of the 7 keys, but I do know that's one of the key tools.
It is. You nailed it. Key number 1.
Oh!
Pay attention to the evidence journal.
Well, it is the number 1 in all the interviews that I've had that people have asked me about. And it's the feedback that I get from people telling me how it has really made a difference for them.
So what is this? The evidence journal really is tracking time spent on key activities?
Well, it's anything that you really need to look at or want to look at. So I had another client that the way that her relationship worked was she always stopped what she was doing and addressed her partner. So it seemed like her life was stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. And when she was able to put this down, she was able to see how often that happened. It's anything you want to look at. Now, what I advise is if you're writing, one of the things as writers is most writers think we're not writing as much as we ought to be. We're not as far down the road as we ought to be. The oughts, one of the pitfalls, the oughts and shoulds. And when we can write down, like, today I wrote 5 minutes, go and give yourself a high five. You worked, you wrote. And later on in the book, I talk about the other things that writers do, like reading and research, and I think there's 4 others. You write those down too, because they equal writing, because they feed your writing life. Writing is not simply pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. It is part of who you are and what you do. When you're washing the dishes and you're thinking about your story, that's part of writing. Most people don't think that.
That feels like really a relief in a sense, because I think people get caught up with, oh man, I didn't write 500 words, or, oh shoot, I didn't do my 30 minutes today. When oftentimes, and it's interesting having all of these interviews on the topic of writing, that people have pointed this out as well, that like if you have an outline or you know what you should be writing, and then you're off doing something, your subconscious is working so that it ends up flowing out easier perhaps when you do sit down. Has that been your experience or that of people you've worked with?
Absolutely. When I'm writing and I get to a stuck place and I'm like, the words, they're like that bird you can't grab with your hands, I'll get up and walk to the kitchen. It's always the kitchen. And by the time I get back to my desk, I have the answer to my question. I know how to do the transition. It's like moving the body, but it's also stepping away. Because when we change our environment slightly, it changes how we're thinking and approaching what we're working on. So, it's, and it's also another thing is how we define our writing time. I have this writing practice, and it's when I walk, I compose stanzas in my head about what I'm seeing. I practice. I think, how can I convey what I'm seeing so that a reader will have an experience of their own. They can't have my experience, or they're not with me, but they can have an experience, because writing is connection. Bottom line, writing is connection. And then I'll come back, and often these are Facebook stanzas, which, by the way, turned into a poem. Part of them turned into a poem that was nominated for a Pushcart Prize.
I know those have become popular Facebook posts on the topic of, am I wasting time on Facebook? Not if you're building up towards award-winning literature, right?
Exactly. And then treat it like award-winning literature. Edit it. That makes you conscious. That makes you observe with awareness, not just when you're walking, but in your process of writing.
Wonderful, wonderful. And a great perspective, a unique perspective of everybody who's been on the summit so far. And diving a little bit more into your content here in the writer's block myth here with Heloise Jones. You talk about this concept of the outer game, right? And having green lights for success. You call them writer's permission slips.
Yes.
As a different set of concepts than the keys. What would you say about the permission slips and these green lights for writing?
Well, the permission slips really have to do with your action in the world. Okay, the things that writers do, daydreaming and is part of it. Engaging with our imagination, taking as long as it takes. I mean, Charles Frazier, who wrote Cold Mountain, it took him 10 years to write that novel. Now, most of us don't want to take that long. However, he did get a National Book Award and a $13 million advance on his second book. So it's he found what worked for him, and this is the process that works for him. Giving yourself permission to create a space dedicated to your writing. I mean, even if it's the dining room table, this space is my place for my writing, this corner. Don't put your coffee cup in the middle of my writing place. Don't pile your coat on top of my manuscript, that kind of thing. So there's the inner game, but the permission slips are the things that we really get hung up on. And I need to look at my own book to see what some of them are.
No, but just as you're doing that, I'll reflect, I love the idea of having a dedicated space. I mean, viewers of summits we've done are familiar with this backdrop, even though the books on the mantle change with the seasons. The point is, when I sit here, I'm doing this, right? And I don't just sit casually at this desk to hang out. And so having this space where I'm here and I'm on is analogous to having a space where when you're there, you're writing and you're working on your writing your book.
And I'm going to do a PS on that. Have more than one. Because if you sit down at one place and it's not working, try shifting to another place. I have two. I have a chair in one room and I have a desk. And my favorite way, since I write in longhand, I'm an advocate of writing in longhand, your first draft, and then editing on the computer, because longhand is, you want to be in the dream. You're totally in the dream of where it's going to carry you. That's what the process is. The process, even if you have an outline, the work is, it's everything you are. And if you're controlling it, then you're not being as big as you can be, because control is a limit. So all of my rough drafts are longhand, and then I go to the computer and everything from there is at the computer. But if something is not working, I'll move to another chair.
So are we going to give away a page from your original longhand manuscript of Writer's Block Myth on air here?
Oh, if you could see my notes. I mean, I have another tip about that too. But
no, I was just flashing back to the editing process for your book and thinking, wow, did she really write this all out by hand?
I did not write it all out by hand, this particular book, but I wrote a heck of a lot of the notes.
Yeah.
I collected materials for quite a while. I wrote every one of the interviews. I have 3 pads of paper. I wrote every one of the interviews with 25 people by hand. And then I transferred those and organized those because they're conversations. You know, these people didn't sit down and go, I'm going to have A, B, C in that line. It's like the way that I work with people is I listen carefully and then work off of where they're guiding me. And then every one of them had an aha at the end. So, but that was all by longhand. I still have those.
Nice. Well, it sort of touches on the ultimate promise of the book here, even though it's called The Writer's Block Myth, a guide to get past stuck and experience lasting creative freedom. So where we're going with this is having the tools, the permissions, the keys, such that you experience lasting creative freedom. What would you say about that, and how do you view that as a goal?
Lasting creative freedom is a mindset. And what this book is set up, it's set up that everything builds on itself. So if you start from the page 1 and move through, you're making microscopic shifts and leaps. People will make leaps. And what happens is you've shifted your mindset. You've shifted your mindset into a different state of awareness. You've shifted your mindset, expanded your mindset about how you can set up your life so that it works. You have a guide to ask the questions. I mean, that's the thing that most people don't have. They don't. One of the permission slips is use your voice. You know, we want to be that other writer, but our voice is our superpower. Only we have it. And when we click into that groove of our voice, that's where our power is, because people recognize it. And that's where...
Do you mean speaking voice or writing voice?
It's a writer's voice. It's a writer's voice. And the other part is that your writer's voice changes according to genre. And one funny story that you know this story is I wrote the book with my online voice. And when it was done, the economy of my online voice, I didn't feel really served the printed book. So I rewrote the entire book in a more, the entire book, every page, and in a more conversational style that works for the printed page.
So I actually, that's quite an undertaking on the one hand. And I think there may be an instructive lesson here. People watching this in the writing process, in the midst of it, or about to enter into it, what do you do when you have a realization that the whole thing you wrote needs to be reworked? It seems I would give a fork in the road of, screw it, or let's hunker down. And what was your experience there, and what would you advise people on?
Well, my experience is to understand that 90% of writing is rewriting and revision. And to always go back to the process. Not focus on, we all have deadlines, and we all have desires and druthers when we want to be done. And remember the greats. Remember that Ernest Hemingway claimed 39 drafts for the last page of Farewell to Arms. And his son just found out it's really 47 drafts. He found in his papers 47 drafts. And when in an interview he was asked, why so many drafts? He said the words weren't right. So realize that when you're writing a book, it's a relationship you have with that book. And it's a relationship you have with what you want from the book. And that writing is connection. There's connection between your heart and your head, and your heart and your head, your head and your heart to the written words. And then after the words are there, the connection back to your heart and head. And then finally, the connection with your reader. And so that's your main desire, is connection with your readers. That is the ultimate definition of success, which in the book I talk about coming up with your own definition of success. And when you have your own definition of success, then there are no comparisons because there's only what you're moving to and what you desire.
Well, that's a great working definition of success, to have a connection and a relationship with your end reader who, at the end of the day, you write a book, sure, it's a nice experience for yourself, but it's for the benefit of the reader, or for their enjoyment or entertainment if you're in the fiction genre. But it's for the reader. A book is nothing without a reader, as anybody that's self-published and has a ghost land of reviews and zero sales can attest, right? So we all want at the end of the process. But really valuable insight, Heloise, on the emotional experience, the process of writing, defining your own definition of success in writing. What else would you say that maybe we haven't touched on that's important for people to hear that are deep in it or heading into their next book?
Well, I can't underestimate the value of either a writing coach or an editor. Because when we're stuck, when we're deep in it, when we're in our comparisons, most of us, it's the stories. Underneath everything, including ads, is the stories. The story is in between the lines in the book. It's behind the words. And a lot of those stories come from our experience in life. And so they're the thing. Again, we're back to what happens on the page is connected to our life. So it helps to have somebody objective, whether it's another writer or a professional that, can hear the holes, can, have the tools to keep you moving, or my book, The Writer's Block Myth, to refer back to, because we need something sometimes that can take us out of ourselves. Wherever we go, there we are. And when our stories are sitting there, like our old friend fear and our old friend the critic, they think they're helping us. They're saving us. Perfectionism, this is saving us. It's saving us from rejection. It's saving us from failure. It's saving us from all those things. It helps to have somebody else that can see it differently. And I'm talking about somebody like a writer or a professional. I'm not talking about your mom or something like that, unless she's a writer and a professional,
Even then, probably not advisable, if only because they're not objective. But that's an important point as well. I think it's a cathartic experience, which is a enjoyable part of what I do, to give a professional, objective perspective through myself or our editorial team, and to get that feedback. Sometimes authors breathe a sigh of relief to be like, oh, somebody gets what I'm trying to do and is giving valuable guidance on doing it the best way possible.
And on a short sidebar on that one, is having the right perspective on feedback. Number one, you are the author. You can say yes, you can say no. The right editor will ask, what do you mean to say here? Because this is what I'm hearing. And then that's your cue that you're not getting the message or saying what you intend to say. And the other part is that when you get feedback, especially when you finish your book, step away. Step away, give it 1 month, 3 months, whatever, then go back. Because all of that emotion that your baby has been criticized, all of that emotion will level out and you'll be able to go back in a little more objectively yourself.
Well said. Well said. I mean, I often joke, but it feels real, that, writing my own book was the male equivalent of giving birth. It's just in there and it's growing and it's not ready to come out yet, but by golly, it's kicking. And then one day it's done. And it helps to get some objectivity, because it does take on a life of its own, as viewed through the eyes and experience of the readers, right? Because, I think another theme that is running through this summit is you can never anticipate where someone's at in their life when they come across your book and they read your book. And one passage that may have been a throwaway line almost, is the exact thing someone needs to hear to make a shift. And that's how the book takes on the life of its own when read by and experienced by many other people.
Absolutely. That is so well said, because you can't, just like all writers are different, all readers are different. And that, you know, it's like we have all different experiences, we have different skill sets, we have different stories we carry around for ourselves. And it's allowing the book to have its own life. And in that vein, I will also say I stress very much in the writer's block myth that as you're writing, the book has a life of its own. And to allow it to be as big as it can, because that's what creativity is. We're expanding the dance floor of creativity when we say yes to the yeses, no's to the no's, and get through that, you know, and adopt that mindset. We're allowing creativity to flourish, which of course for authors means we're flourishing.
I like it. I like it. A very, very rich conversation on the process of writing here with Heloise Jones, author of The Writer's Block Myth, which you get a free copy of. You probably even have in your hands or on your hard drive now for registering for this summit. So take advantage of that and go deeper into the book and into the topics that we've covered here. And Heloise also has a nice gift for everybody here on the line. I'll let her tell you about that, and then we'll bring this to a close.
Thanks, Jesse. As a thank you, another thank you for being here and for the honor of sharing about writing, because it's nothing I love more. I'm passionate about writing, for 2 decades passionate about writing. If you go to my website, www.heloisejones.com/hello, and Heloise has a silent H, so it's HELOISEJONES.com/hello. There is a creative life worksheet guide, and it asks those questions. This is a preliminary guide for the creative life. It asks those questions that you can start answering. And it talks a little bit about that process. And so you can find out what really matters to you. Maybe you think that you need this big writing gazebo, you know, like Neil Gaiman, and, you know, you got trees all around. Whereas really, when it gets right down to it, what you want is a window over your shoulder and somebody to not throw their coat on your manuscript. But it allows you to get to that place where you find out what matters to you. And then in the back of the book, there's a very expanded version of this. But start with the Creative Life Guide. And it's my thank you.
Well, what a great gift, and what a pleasure to have you, Heloise. Just reflecting, actually, I'm feeling like a proud publisher now, that I'm being inspired by somebody that I've, you know, worked with over the past couple of years to bring this book into existence. So pleasure to have you back on almost the 1-year anniversary of Writer's Block Myth coming out. Great conversation. Hope you've all enjoyed this. Be sure to get Heloise's guide, and we'll link that up wherever you're watching this video, and dive into the Writer's Block Myth, which is included when you registered for this summit. Of course, if you pick up a VIP pass for the Write a Book You Love Summit, you not only get lifetime access to all these interviews to reference back to as you're working on your book or your next book. We've also put together a bunch of amazing resources from the speakers and presenters as part of the summit. So be sure to check that out. We'll see you on a future interview. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Heloise.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate it.